and welcome to part 2 of my interview with Deon Simpson from the Dartington Service Design Lab. In this part, Deon takes us through a real-world example where a rapid cycle approach was used with a charity called Chance UK. I hope you find it useful. Thank you.
So I think for me, it might be helpful because this is the part that really gets me excited. So what is different about this method? What it really does differently? So for me, there are two defining features of rapid cycle design and testing, I'd say. So there's a theory-based part, and then there's a rapid iterative loops or cycles. And I'll just briefly explain each part. So first, there's the theory part, and I think this is the part that really works well and makes it valuable for social complex programs. So as I've been saying throughout, we encourage programs to understand the theory behind what they're doing. And we use the early steps in rapid cycle design and testing, especially assess, in order to develop and articulate this theory. And then we use the theory to underpin pretty much everything else that we do from that point, including the designing and evaluation of the program. And of course, the aim here is to learn whether the theory is correct and whether we should keep going or if we should adapt.
Okay.
Or if we stop altogether.
I was going to ask that way. What if your theory is wrong? Then you change it basically.
That is it. So it gives you that freedom basically to make some hypotheses based on your best available evidence. So you'll draw on things from science, including what they say are evidence-based programs, but you'll also draw from your own local practice. You will draw from evaluation reports of similar programs within your context. So you pool all these different perspectives together, as well as the perspective of young people, for example, in our case. So you'll ask them about their own journeys through support services and what they expect and what motivates them. So this is what you have available, and you have to pool all of this together and come up with a hypothesis, which isn't easy, and you don't know if it will work, but you're reflecting on all the things around, including context. You generate this hypothesis, and then you set about testing it. And you'll ask yourself some tough questions at the end, which is the pause and decide step. Do you keep going? Do you adapt, or do you stop altogether? And these are crucial questions and decisions for any program, whether it's in social care or healthcare. And I think that's what a theory-based approach helps to do, and not all rapid evaluation methods or rapid cycle methods use theory in this way. So for example, PDSA, so the Plan, Do, Study, Act model, depending on who's applying it, they may not always draw on theory in this way, but with our method, it comes with the theory involved.
Perhaps we could bring it back up and you could just go through, not too much detail, but just briefly each step and what actually happened with the Chance UK.
So Chance, it is a recent example of us using this method successfully. So we've been doing it for a while, and as I said, we work closely with the partners that we're supporting, just so we can also learn more about the method as well. As I said, specialist means we're always learning and growing. So this is a recent example, and Chance is a London-based mentoring service. They support children 5 to 12 who have emotional and behavioral difficulties, and then they provide them with an adult mentor from their local area within London, who then works with them over a period of about 9 months or so to help them improve. And this program has been supporting children for several years. And then just before working with us, they were evaluated using a randomized controlled trial. And the findings were not what they hoped, but they revealed for them that perhaps after several years of delivering in the same way, it was time for some reflection, some innovation, and some learning so that they can continue to adapt to changing contexts and to improve. So they were quite excited to go on this journey with us, and they're a wonderful team, really embrace the idea of being flexible, letting go of needing to control things, and really trying to accommodate the fact that things are flexible, things are changing, and they're complex, and then how to use a theory-based process, generate evidence, take time to learn from it very quickly, I might add, and then to be comfortable in making small changes and then to keep going. So they're a very brave team, really wonderful to work with.
It's a quick question. Do you think you need a receptive team? You really need a team that's bought into this to be able to use it with them effectively?
Yes, so you do for sure. And I'd say that for improvement, you do need buy-in at the very beginning into the idea that it needs to be a culture change. So again, it's not a process that will be external, coming in, happening, and then you leave. So it will require a culture change, an organizational change, and that requires support from the top. So we had the CEO of Chance UK on board with us from the very beginning, and she led this process, as it were. So she was at the front championing this method and supporting her team all the way to change. And then the person I worked very closely with to have these monthly implement and observe sessions was a senior program manager. And then we had program managers who are really good at embracing this process. So it definitely does require commitment, and it requires an appreciation for the idea. So we collaborated with them for 2 years to apply this rapid cycle design and testing method, and we did it in 3 cycles. So over 2 years, we had 3 cycles. The first cycle was about 7 months, and the length of the cycle is dictated by what you're doing in each step, as well as the stages. So this method is a structured method. So each step has some clear things in it that you will do, and that makes it replicable. So going in, for example, you know that in the assess step, this is where we looked at what Chance UK had been doing over the 25 years that they had existed. So we looked at data that they collected. We looked at the learning from the randomized control trial, as well as learning from a previous evaluation. This was a pre-test, pre-post evaluation that they had done before. So we looked at that, as well as learning that was held by the team as well, and learning held by mentors and mentees. And we reflected on all of this in the assess stage and developed their theory of change. So that process took about a month with focus group discussions and some desk-based review of the evidence. We also interviewed experts on mentoring, and these were global experts, just to also get their perspective on the scientific evidence surrounding mentoring. And we pulled all these together and identified the key mechanisms for mentoring. So things like goal setting and things like planning, and certain techniques such as building children's motivation, for example, teaching them how to recognize their emotions and how to manage their feelings within a given situation to be able to respond appropriately. So these were the specific techniques that the program was meant to offer. But then, of course, how they do this will differ for each child. So goal setting may be around sporting activities if that's of interest to the child, whereas for another child, it will be something else. So we focus on the core bits from the evidence, and then we package those to fit the context, including the young people and children that they were working with. So we agreed on all of that in the assess step. And then in the design step, the Chance UK team led by translating all of this into interesting designs for the program, into the activities. They developed a really good new curriculum. So they didn't have one before. So they developed a new curriculum that was structured around the theory and the evidence, and had in examples of ways to flex the activities based on the child's needs and the development stage. So ways to make the activities simpler if the child was younger, and how to make it harder if the child required more challenge, but still keeping the core mechanism that they were delivering, whether it was goal setting or learning how to manage feelings or how to respond to triggers, for example. And that idea of core and flex is a theory principle, the idea of being clear on what's core about your program and what it's doing, and in the flexible bits. So having a theory of change or a logic model helps you to focus on that from the very beginning. And again, a very valuable process to use. And then in the implement and observe stage, they started delivering, and then we would work with them on a monthly basis just to review this data. And as I said, it's not high intensity collecting lots of information using a survey or a questionnaire or a focus group discussions. It was more about just having a check-in. So we had monthly meetings anyways, just for project management purposes. And then we'd commit a part of that meeting to just asking questions about the data. How are things going? How is implementation going? Have we had feedback on this process from mentors and from mentees? And feedback is qualitative data. So in these meetings, we would learn that some mentors were struggling to enter data because there were system glitches. So they tried to get into the system, but it wouldn't work, or they'd enter information and it disappeared, or other sort of things. And we learned that in the first month. And we had to respond because the data that was coming in wasn't very good. So we looked at the data and we saw gaps in it. And then when we asked mentors what's going on, then they said, things aren't working very well, or some of the questions make no sense. Some of the questions on the data collection form about their sessions, it doesn't make sense to them. They don't understand it. So then we would reframe these questions very, very quickly, because of course, if it doesn't make sense, then we're not collecting good data. And then another thing that we noticed very early on actually was missing of sessions. So we noticed that mentees and mentors would plan a session and they would agree, but then sometimes the session was not held. So we expected this to happen, but it was happening more frequently, very early on than expected. And some of the reasons for why this was happening were also unexpected. So what we assumed and hypothesized in the assess stage, it wasn't what we were seeing in the early stages in implementation and observation. So we didn't have enough data to really understand why. So we waited until we got to the analyze and learn stage or step, which was just about 2 or 3 months later. So by then we had pooled enough data together and we could see a pattern emerging from that. And then we analyzed this and then drew some insights, which was basically us mainly as researchers doing visualizations of the data and then writing summaries of this. And then I worked with the program team to also get their insights from why this was happening. And then we sat down in a pause and decide meeting to really reflect on all of this and to make some decisions. And it was in that meeting that we realized that, yes, some of the reasons for missing sessions were avoidable and can be anticipated. So therefore we should do something about it. And we're able to make some changes based on that. If we had let that go for say a year or 2 years, then you would find that you'd have really poor attendance or lots of missing sessions. And the only thing that you could do by then was just reflect on the fact that it happened for X, Y, Z, and next time you'll try not to let it happen again. But that would obviously have affected delivery of the program, potentially outcomes, we don't know. To actually see that and respond within a matter of months was really, really effective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can really see that.
Yeah, and I do have that slide here. So it is this process where we were using that cyclic method of learning. So at the end of cycle 1, we realized that about 1 in 5 sessions were missed because parents canceled at the last minute. So we did have a list of unavoidable, foreseeable reasons, such as bad weather, for example, or illness, or emergency, or environmental disruption. So we had those as unavoidable reasons. So there's nothing you can do when these things happen. But we didn't have that parents just cancel for no reason or at the last minute. To us, that was avoidable, and we didn't expect to see this happening, especially in 1 in 5 sessions. So we found out why by talking to mentors, by talking to parents and carers and reflecting with the program managers. And then they also noticed that low parent engagement corresponded with this. So parents weren't necessarily engaging in the program. And then we had all these missed sessions. So we reflected on this and agreed to make some changes. So one of the suggestions was to have a new parent engagement pack, which is basically a set of activities that mentors would do with parents and supervisors would do with parents, just to help them to increase their buy-in into the program, their understanding of their role, to commit to actually participating and helping their child to participate. And this included committing to attending sessions once they've been planned and reviewing this over time. So mentors and program managers would also meet with parents more often to check how they're going, how things are going, how they're doing, and their level of engagement. And then mentors also said that they would like more support to be able to engage with parents. So a reason why only 36% of parents were being engaged by mentors is because some mentors lack the skills and confidence to do this. So they wanted more support. So we also did that. And of course, Challenge UK led all these changes themselves and they implemented them. And then we saw that that was positive. So there were fewer cancellations by the time we met again at the end of cycle 2 in Pause and Decide, and engagement had gone up. So we decided that this is good. So we will keep going with this change that we had made. And then for cycle 3, this is around the time when the COVID-19 pandemic happened. So that did affect engagement to some extent. So the program had to move online for a lot of sessions, or using remote methods, so phone calls. So Chance saw this as an opportunity to do even more in terms of trying to maintain engagement. So they reached out to their partners in schools, so working with teachers and also working with social workers, because they can reach parents when Chance can't. So they use these avenues to keep engaging with parents and children, to keep encouraging them to keep up with their mentoring sessions. And that, along with the changes that were implemented at the end of cycle 1, led to a further decrease in the last minute parent cancellations.
Yes.
Continued along a positive path, and we saw some decrease in engagement, but it still remained high. And especially considering the context that that mentoring was happening in, which was the COVID pandemic, but it was high and still higher than where they had started in cycle 1.
It's great to see, isn't it? It really shows how, by sort of actually relating to what's happening and interacting with what's happening and making those improvements, those changes, then you actually are steering this intervention to being more effective and more sustainable long term, aren't you?
And yes, and again, going back to the theory, so it's the idea that we ask these kind of questions from the very beginning. So, we do come up with this program theory, and then we set a hypothesis that if delivery, if we do this, for example, if we train mentors and if we provide them with materials, then they'll plan mentoring sessions. And if mentoring sessions are planned, then mentoring sessions will happen. And if mentoring sessions happen, then children will show outcomes. I mean, this is basically what you set in terms of a theory or a logic model.
Yes.
And then we say, but when we're making this hypothesis, we're assuming that children will engage with the program, or we're assuming that they will attend sessions. We assume that parents and carers will value this intervention, make it a priority, and once sessions are planned, that they'll keep them. So we make all these assumptions as well. And then we assume that sessions will only be missed because of bad weather, because of illness, because of emergency. But we're also keeping an eye out for any unintended events or any unexpected realities, because we're delivering a program in real life and we're taking account of context and the fact that these children have parents, and we're working directly with the children, not the parents.
Yes.
We think about all these things, and then we say, okay, fine, now let's test these assumptions and theories. And then, of course, when we looked at the assumption that sessions would only be missed for predictable, foreseeable, unpredictable, and things that you can't avoid, that those are the only reasons why sessions would be missed. And then we saw that that assumption wasn't completely true. So sessions were being missed for other reasons that can be avoided and can be predicted, and that we need to do some more work in order to address that. And that meant working harder to get parents to value the program more, and to support mentors to help them to be able to engage and value. So that's something that we did learn. And we didn't necessarily change the program theory. We tested or a hypothesis, basically. So it didn't mean that we had to change core mechanisms or anything like that. What it meant was, in terms of the what you call the earlier structures that you have in place in the program, so the support and the activities, we had to put more into that, or add something which was new parent engagement activities and more support during supervision for mentors. So that's what a change could look like. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw out your entire theory of change or your entire core program theory. It might mean that you need to adapt a specific activity or the way you do something as well as you go along.
Yeah, and that and I guess this is really potentially, in a way, it's a never ending. It's a continual, you might say, optimization, because say you finish this now, but then another service wants to use this intervention, they would have to follow the same process, because there may be contextual issues that are different in that service that weren't in this one. And then, so it's that you're never going to get to that end point of like, this is now the final form of the intervention. This is how it should be done. We've shown this through these cycles. This is what it should look like. There's always probably going to be tweaks needed wherever it's taken. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yes. And I guess you should look at programs as continuously changing and hopefully improving, so getting better, not worse. So a method like this does help you to even do self-evaluations as well. So you don't need someone external to come in and drive this. It's the idea that you embrace a culture of evaluating yourself, your program, and continually changing where change is needed. And you're making small changes, so you're not changing everything at once. So because you're making small changes, then the idea is that you have this program theory and your hypothesis, you make small changes to you do tests to test these different hypotheses, and you can have several, so you might have to prioritize what you're testing in a given cycle or in a given series of cycles. And then there's always room to test and change others or to change more.
Yes, and if you had, say, a really staunch old school kind of, I've been doing randomized control trials for 30 years, and they say, you can't be changing the intervention. You need to prove it works before. What would you say to someone who said that?
Well, how do you prove it works? What does that mean? So if you use a randomized control trial, and the question that you're answering is whether or not it works, and works on average, because you'll be focused on average effects, then how helpful is that answer if that's all you know? So again, it depends on the question that you're asking, and a method like this sits on a pathway to getting you to be able to be ready for a randomized control trial to answer those definitive questions. So I think what we should focus on, in addition to asking whether something works on average, you should focus on understanding how the program works. And by understanding how it works and works in context, you'll be able to replicate it. So I think knowing that one program worked after a randomized control trial in a specific setting might not necessarily be helpful if you can't replicate it in other settings, or if you don't know what you can and cannot adapt when the context changes or when the needs of your population change. And COVID-19 is a perfect example. So the context has changed. The needs of children and young people who, in terms of the services that we work with, their needs have changed, and in some cases it has worsened, or they've had additional needs in addition to what the program originally supports, and the programs have had to adapt to that. So how do you make those kind of decisions if you don't understand how your program really works to effect change and what combination of components work and for whom it works and doesn't work in certain situations? So I think having those kind of answers are more important for the day-to-day performance and sustainability of programs. And then when a program has continuously demonstrated that evidence and gained that confidence over time, then they're in a great position to undertake a randomized control trial to get those definitive answers. So I think that's what this method does, and that's what improvement adds to the evidence base. So it's a continuous journey of improving and getting better and getting that evidence and confidence first. And then when you have those definitive answers, then you're ready for a randomized control trial.
Is there anything else that you would like to sort of add, or anything before we perhaps start to close up?
So I don't know, I guess there are some typical things that people might ask when they're trying to do this. So, how long is a cycle, for example, and how much money and time this takes? And especially since we use the word rapid, I know in the field of rapid evaluation, rapid testing, there's no one definition for what rapid means. And for us, and also for programs, we use months. So we say it takes months, not years. Or certain things like monitoring will be over a period of weeks, not years. But we don't mean hours or days. The programs that we're supporting are really complex programs, and they're addressing really complex, serious issues. So this is not a trivial process. It's not simple. So it is accessible and it can be used readily, but it isn't simple. It's not a simple cyclic step. So there needs to be some appreciation for that, and the fact that it's a thinking method as well as a doing method. So we do encourage thinking before you plan and then start doing, and there's learning as well. So there should be time committed to doing that. So I'd say those are the kind of things that define rapid for us. It means months, and
Yes.
it means weeks instead of waiting years. And then it does encourage you to think, so to put time into doing that, and in order to actually learn.
Yeah. So Deon Simpson's from the Dartington Service Design Lab. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun to talk about our work and to talk about this method, and hopefully it will be helpful to a lot of services who do need something different that helps them to be able to learn and improve and adapt to their different needs as they go along.
I'm sure it will.